Well,
Okay, thank you.
say it again. I will now call the meeting to order and ask for a roll. Commissioner Forster. Commissioner Lewis.
Present.
Countryside.
Boyster is here.
Oh, okay, great. Lutzford, Shannon, and what was it? Meyer.
Here.
Seal. Here. Mayor Clark.
Here.
Chairperson Lyman. Here. Our first item is work sessions tonight. Our first item is community planning strategies. CPS will lead a work session on the 2026 targeted code updates for Chapter 7 land use regulations of the Ridgway Municipal Code, covering the following topics: zoning districts, residential types, lodging types, and provide a community engagement summary.
We have TJ online. He's starting to screen share here. Let me just figure out how to make it bigger. Is that big enough for everyone in the room? Okay, thank you.
All right, ooh, it's getting sunny. We good to go? Oops.
Good to go, TJ.
All right, well, perfect. Well, good evening, everyone.
You're a little quiet.
See if I can figure that out on my end.
How about now?
A little better.
That's good.
A little bit better? Or I can go ahead and put the mic on. Make that just a little bit easier. Probably for everybody. Sorry, just a second. There we go. Can you hear me? Is that any better?
Just speak up if you don't mind.
Okay. Jack, you can hear me good? So there we go. Okay. Can you hear me better now? Is that any better?
Good enough.
All right. Where am I going? Let me try one thing. Not that. All right. Well, we'll just go ahead and I'll try to speak up if you can't hear me. Just holler. All right. So, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the targeted code update here this evening. The agenda is, as mentioned, we'll do a quick summary. Then we'll talk about different types of zoning structure. Then we'll talk about your zoning districts and lodging types. Those are kind of the big work session topics that we want to dive into this evening. And then a quick overview of the project timeline and updates. So first, the community engagement summary. As you know, this is a kind of a summary of the types of the plan of the engagement that we're looking to do. So one, we have business cards. Angie has those, handing those out. They have QR codes to the project website. We do have a project website that will be updated regularly through the course of this project. I have the link here. And if wanted, we can go just walk through that real quickly this evening. I think though the primary way to get information out there to those who are most interested, right? It's a code. It's not a it's not a very enjoyable. It's a pretty dull conversation, if you will, for most people. So it's a little bit more targeted, and so Angie has an email list of individuals to send those to, and we'll be kind of sending regular updates to that group as well throughout this. And then we will have a few community engagements events in person. We were there for the concert series as well as the farmers market on July 9th and 10th, and we'll go through a little bit of what we received during that those events, and then we do have a few other engagements along the way, events that we'll participate in, but mostly, as I said, a lot of it is going to be digital, website driven, review driven, and whatnot. So, yeah, has anyone gone to the project website yet? Or seen it?
Yes, now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you seeing it? Am I sharing the whole screen? So are you seeing the?
Yes.
Okay. So just real quick, this is the project website. There's a link on the town's website directly to this. It's pretty, call it pretty basic, but it's the hub of information. So we have the project overview, what we're doing, background as to why. Project documents will live here, and the updates will live here. Let me see if, oh, shoot. Okay. We use a program or a software called, I don't know actually what it's called. It's a company called Conveyo, and they host PDFs and allow comments and reviews online, and we'll be using that here as well. It's a pretty nifty way to review and track comments on a PDF. Yeah, we talked about updating this as well, but we'll have the events and project timeline on there, and then a contact us form that comes to us. So if anyone has any questions or wants to be added in there. So again, pretty simple update website that just has the basic information. So people, when they go there, they can find what they need and get in contact with who they need to. So, any questions on that? Okay. So now for the fun stuff. We got to go hang out at a concert and a farmer's market a couple of weeks ago. And we actually, I think, got some good feedback. We asked essentially two types of questions, two general things. One was kind of that center bottom picture of value statements. How do you feel about these things, these elements, and their applicability in the historic development patterns of Ridgway? And then the top middle picture, kind of a preference type exercise that says, show us, how do these reflect what you envision the historic development patterns of Ridgway looking like? It was intended to be pretty vague and inform, kind of ambiguous, if you will, so that we could get some really good feedback on just values, if you will, right? Not the nitty gritty. Do you want a 5-foot setback or an 8-foot setback? But what does that look like and feel like for people to make sure that we're going in the right direction with some of these? So this is the feedback that we got related to the development pattern. So these are that, if you saw that, the 3 values. So take a sticky dot, put it in the always, sometimes, never circle. And kind of how you think that these should be implemented in the historic development of Ridgway. And so on the bottom there are the topics. There were 6 of them: paved streets, sidewalks, street parking, historic architecture, mixed-use buildings, and increased density. The yellow that is most prevalent in here is the sometimes. And so a lot of, Angie and I talked a lot about this, and it's almost baked in. Some people would look at this and say, like, this really didn't tell us anything. Everybody said sometimes they want it. Well, that's right. But a lot of the conversations that we had related to these it's all context sensitive, which is exactly what we're trying to create, if you will, of where should it go? How should it go? Where do sidewalks lead? When should they be in place? And the idea here is that, yes, sometimes there's a place for them and sometimes there's not. And I think that's the key. And we'll continue to thread that needle along the way. Obviously, the big one that sticks out is the historic architecture. That overwhelmingly, respondents said always they want that be a part of it. Now, what that means is something that we'll be exploring a little bit, and how. And I know that that's a topic of maybe the next work session of, what historic design means and getting waivers for those and things like that. So we'll continue those conversations and try to incorporate those in here as well. And then on the preference, these pictures, a couple of the key takeaways again so these are counts on the right, and you could see most people, well, not everybody responded to every item, right? So we had up to 24 or so respondents, some didn't respond to all of them, and that's okay. So that's why we have this being a little bit different. But bring your attention to picture 10 and 12 in particular. Well, I guess 3 also is a big one, right? 2 pictures of the park. Obviously, those are good. People love them. They're great events. They're essential in the historic, feel and look of downtown. The other big component is the streetscape. And then if you look at 11, which only got 1, a lot of responses and only 1 negative. And I remember the person who put negative, they were just like, I don't like the design of the bike rack. So, people were taking some liberties in this, and that was the kind of the point. But I think the sense that we're taking away from here is that, hey, when you guys did this ramp project years ago, you hit the nail on the head, and it's exactly what people are thinking that the downtown should look like. And so what I think we were going to want to do, what we could take away from these, pretty basic questions and conversations that we had is baking these concepts into the appropriate areas once we define what that downtown or that historic core is looking like, or cover what the area is essentially. So yeah, any questions or comments or feedback on that? Angie, anything to add from your time with hanging out with me?
I'll add something real quick. So we tried to chat with the folks as they were voting, so we have a general sense of like what exactly they were voting for. If you guys wonder on any of those, like why is there so many red on 6? Go ahead.
Yeah.
What's not?
9 is showing the street without any sidewalk or improvements, no curb gutter. It's just the gravel street kind of bleeding into the properties there.
And 6.
6 is the Habitat triplex. And most of the negative comments that were coming from that were just that it looks kind of cookie cutter, or that it's maybe a little bit too dense for someone's taste.
That should be my point. The density as it finishes. They're pretty much the same. Yeah.
And we were targeting their focus on the historic core. So obviously that's a development that's not in the historic core. However, in the historic core, we do allow for triplex developments. So something to keep in mind.
None of them are comfortable to sit on.
We have Jack with his hand up.
Yeah, can you all hear me?
Yep. Well, at least I can.
You can hear me?
Jack's got a comment.
I can't, I'm on Zoom. I can't really make these photos out. What's the photo number 4 of? Is that Kate's?
That's the back of the Heron
No.
House. But it's
Okay.
showing the alleys, really. That was kind of the intent for that picture, I believe.
What's the photo number 5 depict?
Mountain Market.
Okay. And I can't tell what number 12 is.
The park.
Okay.
Big Cotton
Thank
Woods.
you.
Thanks.
You could do that.
We also have these physical copies in my office, and I brought them to the last planning commission meeting in case you guys wanted to take a closer look. But anytime you want to look at them, let me know.
I got it. I just find these pictures to be really vague, and I don't know, like, we got 4 comments on the church. I mean, are those just? Is that one person like, I don't like churches? I just like, I don't get this. I don't think it's a great representation of our community or a mandate in any way.
Yeah,
Okay.
this was meant to stir discussion and kind of entice people to participate in some sort of quick passerby engagement activity where we could like, hey, why you voting that? You know, try to drum up some conversation with them, let them know about our project. No,
Sounds
I think the thing, honestly, don't put too much on it. Just
Okay.
to start.
Okay, well, that's it. I don't want to bake too much on this.
Yeah.
That's it. That's exactly it. Okay, thank you.
It's a starting, right?
yeah, this was the first engagement activity that we did
Yeah.
with folks to kind of just let them know that this project's happening at all. Kind of let people give us their opinion on what we should be talking about or the things that maybe don't matter so much. We're not updating the whole code. We're doing targeted code updates. So we're not going to just take this and redo the whole code.
Not. Yeah. It's not, it doesn't, people listen to the facts and like, never meant, if you quit it, and then you could say, well, we asked for it, but.
And I will. Over and over and over.
I didn't think that them coming to the concert is gonna get much response. You know, and I like the idea of the farmers market because I thought people would pause for just a little bit longer to talk to them.
Did you find that? Is this a combination of both events or?
Yeah. Yeah. So the chart that TJ put together is the counts from both board. We had 2 boards, one from each event. And my understanding, is that right, TJ? You
Yep.
counted them all up from both events and stuck them on this chart. Green is good, red is not so good.
Mhm.
And the picture is just one of them at some point in the engagement. Jack, do you have your hand up again?
Yeah, I can only hear Angie and TJ. I don't know if the mics aren't on, but I can't
Yeah.
hear Michelle or anybody else talking.
Uh-oh.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
I can hear John,
Yeah.
yeah.
Everyone want to, scoot those a little closer.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Hopefully everybody's picked up on the recording.
Hey, Mark, we gotta get to them.
Is there an adjustment I need to make or? Okay.
I mean, we could tweak that.
I don't know what any of it means. TJ, I think we're good on this part.
Excellent. Yeah, and so just to reiterate that the purpose of that was to inform of the project and just start getting some very quick input on various things. And I think again we could take some information away, but of course it is not the be all end all. It just goes into the information banks that we'll use moving forward. So now onto kind of a training, if you will, maybe more of a discussion. And it was brought up a couple of meetings ago that, well, maybe we should talk about form-based zoning and different types of zoning and call it, ways to manage land use from a regulatory standpoint. So we put together this quick and dirty a couple slides about the difference between Euclidean zoning, which is use-based, and we'll go through that. It's that traditional side, and then form-based zoning. And then I also provided some links and a little bit of info in the memo that went out. So these are two very, very deep topics. So I'm going to try and go through them pretty quickly, high level, and then we can have a little bit of a conversation, Q&A, after I go through kind of these quick overviews. So first, Euclidean zoning. What is it? It is a use-based zone structure. The traditional, right? So where it starts is back in the 1930s with tenement settlements and developments in New York City, where people were living right next to factories and getting sick. And that's not where Euclidean comes from, but uses and use-based. So that's the intent of that traditional zoning structure, to separate uses. And as we've moved forward in modernizing that structure, what I put here is modern, that's kind of my terminology, is that it has morphed into a structure that has broader use categories that overlap and provide an acceptable or appropriate level of overlap in uses in different zone districts. So it does what I call flattens and widens. In the, if you will, the policy realm, they call it zoning reform. But those are the kind of the buzzwords as in where Euclidean zoning, that use-based zoning is moving. It is, as you would imagine, it's heavily based on the use of a piece of land. And in general, those uses are broken into residential uses, commercial uses, and industrial uses. There's also civic or public uses thrown in there, but in general, that's about it. And then, of course, you break that out further and farther. Design guidelines are used, whether they're standards in the code or a separate design guidelines document, to help address some of the form and the design of structures, site layouts, things of that nature. Euclidean zoning, use-based zoning does focus, though, on the private property, not as much on the public property. And so you hear these, I say it later on, it's the last bullet of the lesser, it does not focus on the relationship between the public and private realm, right? The public realm being the streets, alleys, things of that nature, private being private ownership. And it really identifies the impacts that uses have on adjacent properties and minimizes or mitigates those impacts. So again, it's use-based, this is it, right? You have a zone district, you have a list of uses that say in this zone district, you can do these things. The specificity of that, the strictness of that can vary greatly between jurisdictions and contexts. So that's again, a very high level overview of zoning or the Euclidean zoning. On the form-based side, it does what, I think I have one more, what you would expect, that it is form-based. And what form means in this context is that it is the design of the building, the relationship between the building and the streets or adjacent roads. It also looks at it says if you build it look this way, if your building looks this way, then we're not as strict in what you can do within it. The concept being that by design, you're going to design certain uses out of that possible scenario, right? So if you're requiring smaller lots or smaller footprints, taller buildings, more design, you're not going to have as much industrial type uses, say outdoor manufacturing, deliveries, things like that. So you can, from a design standpoint, mitigate some of those. So that's the concept. So it's saying that as long as you match that physical form, a mix of uses is allowed. This last bullet on here says, this is from the Form-Based Code Institute, their definition that it fosters predictable, high-quality built environments by regulating land development on physical form and the public realm. So it really looks at the relationship between the road and the private property development, how that's situated on a property and how it relates to it. Access, pedestrian oriented. These codes include a lot of information, a lot of detail, a lot of regulations in order to get there. So these typically would include a detailed physical plan, elevations, designs of what they should look like, how tall they are, setbacks, a regulatory plan that talks about where building access points are, where pedestrian scale development is, public or pedestrian focused versus parking areas. And then these are very heavy graphic, heavy on the graphics and diagrams side of codes. The outcomes of them are to be a very predictable to create a predictable built environment. And to really focus, as I said, on that pedestrian scale development, rather than auto-oriented developments. So I just took these examples these are from Boulder. I just did a real quick search and found a couple that at least give the graphic of it. The other challenge with, or one of the challenges with form-based is that it's hard to do a redevelopment do redevelopment standards into a form-based if something's already there. Because what you're looking at, these are the regulatory plans for 2 areas in Boulder that are zoned form-based. It's a zone district essentially in Boulder. And all these lines mean something different. Where the building footprint can go, the uses that are allowed in each of those colors, right? Where the front door has to go, where parking should be, things of that nature are in here. And again, so these are the types of regulation or the diagrams that are included in a form-based code. So when we start thinking about these 2 elements, and I would say that, you have the FAR Euclidean zoning, as I mentioned, and you have the FAR form-based code structures and everywhere in between. So when we start considering these structures for Ridgway, we want to ask ourselves a couple of questions. So one, does the use-based zoning function well in Ridgway neighborhoods? Right. And I don't mean like any in particular, but all of them, whether it's the downtown or any of the subdivisions. Are there areas of town where form or design is prioritized over use? i.e., if you build it this way, we don't care what you do in it, kind of a concept. And then what level of design does the town want to dictate? And I think that's a big one, just because, you can get there a lot of different ways. One of the things that Angie and I were talking about when we were going through this was Minturn. If any of you have been there, right? Their little tagline is keep Minturn funky. And I haven't looked at it yet, Angie. I don't know if you got to, but I know they just did their design regulations a few years ago. And the big question of like, how do you design for, being funky and being unique? It's kind of an oxymoron and whatnot. So I want to be really cautious as we go through there, this conversation of what level do we want to dictate? What level do we want to provide guardrails? Do we want to prevent or require, kind of a concept? And those are the kind of conversations that will lead us to creating standards or policies that will work for the town. Excuse me. So I'll stop right there for a minute and see if anyone has any questions, comments. I want to open it up to discussion, but I also want to I think we need to be just conscious of time. We have a lot more to go through too. And this is the start of the conversation, not the end. So, Jack?
Jack, you're muted.
I'm not familiar with this form type of zoning. It seems to me that the land would not be zoned and a developer or builder would come in with a set of plans and we would zone it for that building. Am I understanding that correctly?
It's basically doing PUDs that the town would come up with the design of sites that then allow flexibility within. It's not dictated that directly, but it's a way to, rather than say you have to have the setback. It talks about the important parts of the form and the orientation, which are front doors, where parking goes, where the front of buildings go, build two lines kind of things. And so it's a little bit different, but it is zoning. It's not designing buildings.
But I guess maybe I don't understand it. It seems frightening to me because I could own a piece of property with a building on it and not know what's going to go next to me until that building was submitted. To me, that would be like Houston, Texas, where there's no zoning. So it seems awkward to me.
And we're not, sorry, just chiming in real quick. Staff is not encouraging that we switch to a form-based code by any means, but this came up a couple of meetings ago. And we thought it was worth exploring this topic, but also just reminding everyone, like, we have traditional zoning, but we also have residential, commercial, and industrial design regulations that are in our code. So there's other things dictating form.
Sorry. Me first.
It's a worthwhile conversation.
Yeah.
And Jack, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't know what's gonna go in next to you if you own a piece of property, because theoretically, the way it's supposed to work is whatever goes in is gonna be compatible design-wise, despite what its use may be. So it allows for more flexibility in use, and that the reason that a lot of communities have gone that direction is just because of the sort of 21st century thinking of how use doesn't have, it's the old way of thinking that says that uses have to be separate, have to be residential here and industrial over here, and never the two can mix. And I think we all would agree, we've had a number of conversations over the last decade or so about how mixed use is really important. And mixed use is essentially a Euclidean zoning way of doing form-based zoning.
Well, and we have some mixed uses that are coming up, right? The far end of the Lena Street Commons is gonna have some commercial. And
The closer in.
I thought it was on the north end.
The north.
Or the sewer.
It's all industrial.
Is it an office on the far end, because that's too close to the
It's
sewer?
industrial. It's
Right.
industrial. And the big empty lot on this end, part of it is the last phase of residential, but there's a big commercial lot next to the library.
And then the vacant lot out there across from Valley Floors, the North Coral out there. Yeah, this section right there next to San Miguel Power also has to be some type of something other than residential because of the closest to the sewer plant. So it's already in the works, and Ridgway is pretty eclectic. So I don't know, Jack, I agree. I don't know exactly what this looks like, and I think that there have to be some parameters so that someone can design something and bring it in, because otherwise it's not just wide open, like do whatever you want. There has to be something, but I think in theory, it makes sense.
The third point, what level of design does the town want to dictate? I would certainly be wary of that myself. It's actually how I got onto this commission when I was feeling pretty proud of myself, having renovated my little Victorian shack up on Charles. And I talked with Don Batchelder and said, "You ever thought about, okay, an architectural review board or something like that?" Well, let me ask you a couple of questions. Can you name a few towns in Colorado that have architectural review boards? I said, "Well, sure. Aspen, Telluride, even Breckenridge." They said, "Why don't you live in any of those places?" I said, "Because I can't afford them." They said, "Well, I rest my case for having a diversity and ability to have design diversity." And he said, if you're interested, and you have a valid opinion that is shared by a number of people around the country and around Colorado, he said, "Why don't you join the planning and zoning commission? You can have your say." And he really convinced me that the last thing we should do is have a strict design requirements.
Yeah.
So,
We kind of lack the historic basis. I mean, we have some, but the fact that this was gonna get flooded, right? And we have reservoir,
yeah.
like, we don't have quite the history going with houses that the Tyrod does.
Yeah.
Can I ask when that was?
25 years ago,
You've been on this for 500?
I think.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah,
And also, I thought of maybe think of this again when, came up at the workshop last week. And said, it was a mistake to outlaw mobile homes. While I don't agree with that completely, I do agree with a diversity of design possibilities, and not to make things require.
well, and it seems like modular. I could be wrong, but modular is somewhat replacing mobile homes, and as
Yeah.
far as I know, you can't get financing for mobile homes. I don't,
Oh,
Think
right,
they-
no, I'm not.
No.
I was not advocating mobile homes. With pre-built homes, whatever. I think that's an exceptionally good opportunities to not only allow that, but encourage. At a range of designs.
I agree with Bill. I love the diversity of design and architecture in Ridgway. We're not URA. It's just kind of a different feel over here. And I think that's what a lot of people like. And we don't live in an HOA, we live in town. Yeah.
the block I live on is a perfect example. I was looking out the window after reading this and I was like, I should do like a video, but I didn't know how we'd actually show it. So
I thought the same, like I need to drive around town.
you should
And take pictures, you know?
It's classic of like every straw bale,
Yeah.
Adobe flat roof, or flat roof, no overhang. I'm like, how were they able to do that?
Yeah,
All metal siding. I guess there's a little stucco, but just the whole realm.
Yeah.
There's I believe it's a modular. I never know quite what to call them. Next door to me, it sits down in there.
yeah, well, that's an old school modular. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Almost one step up from double.
And then the Swiss Village on the end.
Yeah.
It's
That's good for everyone. Exactly. And like us, Teresa, I agree with a plethora of possibilities.
And since we're already there, obviously it hasn't been controlled that strongly as to what people can build. So we're already going in that direction, it feels like.
Yeah, like how do you you can't rein it in now.
No.
You have everything, and that's what it is. I mean, when I first started designing our houses in our HOA, and I talked to our HOA president, said I can't find the design guidelines, and he said, well, just blend in. And we walked around this neighborhood and everything was different. And I said, so obviously design something that's different than everything else there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, that was how it blended in, exactly.
Well, TJ, I think we've,
Yep.
We've dealt with them.
beat this horse pretty well. Yeah, I mean, I think for us to shift the form base at this point would be a pretty big lift. And I do like how, I think kind of what we've come around to in this discussion is just how Ridgway's come up with a kind of a hybrid that is Euclidean with some form-based aspects based on our design guidelines, so.
Yeah, and because of that, I had a hidden slide. Let's see if,
And it's-
You're not sharing.
You can't find
yeah,
it?
I know.
You're not sharing, are you trying? Okay.
There. Yeah. So I wasn't sure. Weren't sure exactly where this conversation was going to go. So we didn't want to necessarily throw options out there. But since we're kind of going in that realm, here are just again some thoughts, right? Because it's not. I don't necessarily want to talk about this right now, but as we're going through all of these, one of the big things that we're going to be doing, and me and our team over here with Angie's support, is going to be figuring out the structure that fits best to thread this needle. And so, right, so we could keep it as is right now, where everything has its own district, and then we have the guidelines for types of uses, right? We could go to a full form-based. That I think everybody could agree that just becomes um, uh, too prescriptive, as well as very, very difficult to administer and use. I've been in a couple of form-based code courses, and it is so confusing to me on how to do it. I've even led a couple of workshops, and I still don't fully get the form-based code process. So then we could do what like Boulder does, and I would say take a look at Boulder's code. It's where they have a zone district that is form based, that somebody could rezone their property to, right? And if it's form based, then they do those plans for it potentially. The other is this hybrid, and honestly, this is where a lot that modern zoning is going. It's really, if you will, form basing Euclidean zoning and saying, what are the components that we want to work with in this? I said that earlier, flattening and widening land uses, making sure that they overlap a little bit. They provide a mix of uses. And then we create an overlay. So you only have one overlay right now that has to do with the UROD, and it's not so much use-based or design-based. It's environmentally driven, if you will, right? Setbacks from the river and being more responsive to that. But you could do an overlay, multiple overlays in the downtown core that takes the underlying zoning and then throws other stuff on top of it specific to that area. So if you will, there could be some of those design standards that rather than tied to land use, they're tied to the area, right? So rather than having design guidelines for residential uses, you have a design guideline for the historic area overlay kind of thing. So again, I just wanted to throw out some different structures as we were going through all of this, because now we're getting right into zone districts, so it flows kind of well. But as we're going through this, and as you're thinking about this, I think these are the things to keep in the back of the mind. What are we trying to accomplish, and what tools do we have to accomplish them? All right. Oh, Jack.
You're muted. Jack. You're muted still. Let me try to unmute you. Try now, Jack. It's saying you're unmuted, but I can't hear you.
Because you switched to your headphones, did you select the headphones and audio?
Nope. Can't hear you.
We cannot hear you. You want us to move on? Okay, he said
Okay.
move on.
Okay. So we want to roll into zone districts. And the purpose of this conversation here is to get an understanding of the zone districts that you have, and trying to use some very bad humor of Goldilocks and find the just right amount of zone districts for the town. So this is I'll caveat this with saying that we're starting the conversation here from what did we talk about? We have some ideas, but we want to talk through what you have right now and what might work, what will work, and how to get there. So this is a quick overview of your zone districts. And this is all in your handout, the memo. So I'm not going to go through it in depth, but we have these here just in case we want to talk about them a little bit more. So first, your low density residential, R district. It's for low to moderate density, mostly single family homes with a mix of housing types. In 2019, that got moved over to, you added the plexes, if you will, duplex, triplex, fourplex in here as well. It also, and there's a lot, as I was going through this, I found a couple of key themes interesting. One of them being in the intent statements, a lot of references to the master plan, which was very deliberate, saying, other things that are consistent and compatible with the master plan are in here. And then the last kind of bullet there is really talking about the environmental protection component of this area. It's intended to be a little bit more open, less dense, to allow for that the environmental wildlife protection, habitat protection, those types of things. Your historic residential. This is your the historic residential core of the town that was originally platted. You can see it there on the right. This allows for medium density residential uses, a variety of use types, single family, duplex, triplex. And then also, again, some uses that are compatible with those and consistent with the master plan. The mixed residential, this is the newest zone district that was established in 2019 updates, that is supposed to provide options for higher density residential uses and a wider range of uses. I also really appreciate and like the second bullet that basically says this is also neighborhood commercial, which is more of a traditional term for it, that allows services that convenience, shops or personal service types institutes in those neighborhoods that are a little bit more compatible with that residential needs. And then it really it talks about the design being compact, pedestrian, and bicycle friendly. So you can already start seeing some of the influence of some form-based principles influencing this zone district as well. All right. Future development. This is it's kind of a reserve. It's a reserve zone district for future growth. In essence, it's for very low density. It only allows very few land uses. The intent of this originally, in general, I don't know the specifics in Ridgway, but many, many moons ago in the early 2000s, this was used as a placeholder zoning for people or property owners to annex into the town, not do anything to the property, and kind of hold it for future development. And this limited what they could do on that without developing. And you can see you have a lot of larger parcels still identified as future development in town limits. Your historic business district. This is the historic commercial core of town, just east of the residential historic core. Here, what you would typically see in a downtown, a very mixed use base area that looks at retail, commercial spaces, residential service, that mix where people can come and do a lot of different things. It is supposed to be create a vibrant and pedestrian-friendly atmosphere. Again, words that you can start seeing the form-based influence in. It does have that last caveat in there that says, hey, if it's a residential development, you need to meet the residential design standards. That tells me that, hey, maybe our design standards aren't as compatible with the context, right? That area. And maybe this is something to look through, which is why we're doing this, I guess. Downtown services. This is an area on that west side of town, right along Highway 62, within 100 feet of the highway. It provides for limited business uses in the properties to manage or mitigate the traffic impacts and to create a transition between those commercial areas and the residential neighborhoods. General commercial. These are areas that are located kind of in that the river area, right, and also at the intersection of 62 and 550. For the most part, it wants to create a mix of retail and commercial uses. There are other caveats that say that residential uses can't be adjacent to the highways. As well with some of the other zoning standards that we have going outside the zone district. But and then again, we have that last bullet that talks about making sure that there's these developments incorporate safe and convenient pedestrian and bicycle connections as well. Then we get into our industrial districts. So first we have the light industrial. That's really it's mostly an employment type district, and is supposed to serve as a transition between the general commercial that we'll get to and the residential on the other side. The intent statements do refer to landscaping and as a means to buffer and break up the properties from adjacent properties and the surrounding areas. Work here or uses here are supposed to function inside the building, and then impacts should be mitigated at the property line. So again, here we go with make sure that we're looking at those adjacent land uses and their compatibility. General industrials, a little bit more intensive industrial uses. Again, same stuff from landscaping used as a buffer and a mitigating factor. Work and the manufacturing or the industrial uses can occur outside the building, but again, all the on-site impacts must be mitigated at the property lines. So with all of that, kind of where we're focusing, and I know Angie will probably be talking more about this later on too, but I don't want to get into this too much right now, but just as taking all that information that we just talked about, this is where we're going to be kind of looking, if you will. We're starting with the zone districts of the historic residential, historic business, and the DS zone, and really focusing on those targeting, if you will, those areas in particular and the standards for those. Okay. So when we're thinking through zone districts in the town, we have these considerations. So one, do these current zone districts reflect the town's desired land use spectrum? We talked about this a little bit. If there might have been some people who weren't there when we did that land use analysis a couple of years ago. Do you have, enough land for the proposed uses that we need in the future? So do we address all of those? Is there adequate overlap? Is there significant overlaps in districts? So there's a fine line there. Sometimes if you have too much overlap, you end up being what that third check mark is talking about that says, hey, maybe we have an unnecessary zone district. Are we doing a zone district just to change the front setback from 10 feet to 20 feet, right? Is there another way to address that? Again, what we're trying to do is right size the zone code or the land use regulations in order to mitigate the applicable issue that we're trying to solve for, not just, willy-nilly make wholesale changes. So try to, if you will, go in with a scalpel and really get fine tuning some of this. So how do your zone districts right now address what you see from a land use perspective, from a growth management perspective? Does it cover everything? Is there anything that's missing? Those types of things. And I'll stop there for some conversation.
Anyone?
I think it comes back to mixed use. I think the future is mixed use. For years now, we've had issues where there's such a high demand for residential property that developers come in and want to put residential property on our few remaining commercially zoned properties. And it's really interesting to me that in the economic situation we're in right now, the need for in-person commercial space could be debated. So it's always going to be needed, but conventional retail is it going to survive the transition we're going through in the world? I just wonder. It's a big question. It's a big issue.
And we've been advised to not give up commercial to residential, because in the future, they may look back and be like, well, why did they do this? Now the town has no sales tax base, which is what a large part of what supports the town.
Right.
But I think that you make a valid point. The two things I thought of were grocery store, which we have one, but it doesn't really serve the community, unfortunately. And medical, right? Those are two things that you still kind of show up in person for. I'm sure there's more, but those were just the two that came to mind. And we've also said, I've heard it said that the commercial isn't currently viable because of what John said, but it could be in the future. I don't know really what the future looks like, so I don't know if that's true. So we're kind of almost in this holding pattern. Not that we've had that many applications, but the few that we have have been largely residential. We're like, no, that's not what we're picturing there. That's not what that's zoned for.
Well,
I don't really have the answer.
I agree with the general premise. The last thing we should do is just give up our general commercial properties and say, go ahead, go build nothing but housing. But that's, to me, that's why the mixed use thing is really what we need to try and figure out. Some sort of commercial use, whatever there's going to be need for on the ground floor and residential above. And people have been arguing for years now that we need to do that in the industrial zone so that people are doing more kind of light industrial kind of uses can have their employees live upstairs. There's all sorts of ramifications of that in the license order and.
Which we heard at council, right?
Yep.
We have local business, speak at council that they're getting I think it's like one person, but they're getting repeated calls to the marshal's office for, delivery trucks, noise.
Right.
But the person lives in the commercial, the historic business district.
They live in Firehouse Project.
So, there's always challenges.
Yeah. And that's not even industrial, that's like just regular commercial.
Well, we had the issue with the smell coming from the cabinet store in is that light industrial?
Yeah.
In the light industrial, so that's not, I support mixed use totally, but.
Yeah, there's very much there.
Issues, right?
Well, there are ways to mitigate that, he just wasn't doing enough mitigation.
Right, but there was a point where it was like, well, that's his right too. At the beginning of that conversation, because it was like industrial zone.
Well, except for it does have, there's requirements on its own that we can't, smell. Mitigate impacts of the property. Yeah, you can't have, BOCs behind the property.
I'm glad we got to that point, but if it wasn't written that way, it would have been a use issue and it's
Right.
Yeah.
So to not answer your question, those are our thoughts.
Yes, I mean what I'm hearing is that I'll just go back to it, the flattening and widening, if you will. And what that means is fewer uses, more general, and more overlap. And I'll just say, I'll reiterate what you're hearing and what you guys are saying, that I have actually seen it multiple times where when you require communities that require that first floor commercial over the last 6 years or so, it has been extremely challenging going to the mat with developers to make sure that that commercial stays there, because the market is so hot for residential right now. But there's also times where that's all vacant and not filling. So it's nobody has the glass, the crystal ball.
We can watch the new development, I never can come up with the name of it.
Riverfront Village.
Thank you. Riverfront Village has a bunch of commercial there.
Yep.
As far as I know, it's all vacant, right? So that would be something at least to keep an eye on.
Mhm.
It's out on the highway. Does that make for more traffic or less traffic? I don't know what the answer is, but something to
Yeah.
keep an eye on.
There's that building on like
Yep.
Lydell too, kind of across from Adobe.
Oh, yeah.
That's residential above, and I've seen the ground floor rented occasionally, but for the most part, I think it's empty.
Where Cornblow used to be, I think is empty, and there's breweries in that other corner.
She's going to look there.
Just further south.
The rusty looking building.
Like, used to have
Yeah,
they have a, some
No.
places.
just down the other way.
Adobe.
Just, yeah, maybe kind of plans.
It has a balcony.
Yeah.
Et cetera, yeah,
The big rectangle with the roof like.
right, sort of, big, garage doors down below in back.
Yeah.
And, a potential office sort of entrance in the front. Yeah. That's,
It seemed like business spaces took a real hit with the sales tax. That seemed to when that, they seem to be somewhat full, and that really, I don't know if that's accurate or not. When the sales tax increased steeply for business.
I'm interested what you guys think about, allowing residentials, in, development, in the, downtown service district.
Say again?
Right, yeah, right now, of course, it's not allowable, I think, except as in downtown service,
What about?
yeah.
Allow
About residential.
Oh, it's used for.
Although,
Residential is allowed in
Residential.
downtown service.
Higher density.
Well, duplex, yeah, I mean, it has the same underlying uses as the residential, the historic residential method. It just also allows low impact.
I just think that, looking at the few lots that are still available. Seems to me it'd be like a great place to put, 6-unit apartments or something like that. That were, that were.
That would be a conditional use, maybe, might even be used by right. I know duplexes and triplexes were used by right. I was just looking at that.
Isn't that in the area where Home Trust is actually looking with the daycare facility with housing on top?
That's actually,
Is that,
HB, I think.
is it?
I know it is on the other side.
HB.
Now.
that's next to.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Exactly, but that's where it starts. After that, it'd be Todd Hoffman's, place of.
Downtown service.
that just has a farm. That's still a.
The outside of the.
Yeah.
That's fun.
It's kind of it's a gray area, I think, for people. I'm not really sure what they can build there. That's how I feel about
Right,
people.
yeah, no, I'm just, like. For me, as far as affordable housing possibilities. Having parking on the opposite side, but just having some rather dense. Development there, to me, makes sense. It's not wildly. It's not, someone's not going to, because of traffic.
That's the thing, that the reason we did downtown service is because of the highway use.
Yeah.
People don't really want to live in a home right on Highway 62.
But the people above, some of the residences above above Lawrence.
I have a lot of highway noise
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
You never know much worse it is.
Yeah.
Living above nine.
It's true. I've just always struggled with what could be done. That would be good for all concerned. Development wise.
That's interesting. They're building a daycare facility?
The home trust?
Yeah.
Can you picture it?
Process, they have the land.
They have the land, it's summer.
See space next to now, I was like, oh, they ever get in and out of it?
There's a vacant lot across the alley from.
Okay.
Yeah.
The civil thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Robert.
What's Roberts? Yeah. Robertson.
They sold it to home trust. Home trust, I think.
That was a great thing they did.
Yeah.
But it's gonna be. That's.
You think they're looking at using the and Gore Street.
Yeah, and then there is a duplex that's going down in that zone, like 2 blocks down on the other side of the right. It's been,
That
I don't know. what
looks
it
like
is.
looks like a giant
No,
What in the world?
oh, yeah. How did that get past our design?
When it was a vacant lot, we kept asking about it, and I'm guessing they didn't ask for anything, any special things, because we never saw it. But yeah, it's interesting.
It's over. Sorry.
I didn't want to say it.
But you don't want too much architectural review.
Yeah, yeah. It's something that's totally covered in metal. With no fenestration. I mean, just.
And it's a corner lot.
Yeah. It's like a shipping container. Anyway. We're getting off track. Sorry.
What's the question?
pull us back, TJ, pull us back.
So
Come on.
we're hearing that a district like downtown service, while it might be confusing, maybe we can clean it up a little bit, has a purpose to kind of allow for some other uses right off the highway in case people don't necessarily want to live right on the highway.
Mhm.
That's what I'm hearing, but
Jackster.
try again, Jack.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm struggling with the headset and the laptop, but what I was going to say earlier, I like the idea of overlay districts, especially within the historic business, like certain areas that would only be 1 story or real Western, and maybe some other places that could be 2 or 3 stories. And I think that's a great idea. And I think we're the conversation was just talking about the overlay district of the downtown business area. And I think we could use that in the historic downtown. Just 1 block, you're allowed to do this block, you're not allowed to do that. You're only allowed to do this. And I think that's a fabulous idea.
Well, and I do predict that sometime in the future, the single-story old buildings will get leveled. And then people will build whatever they're allowed to, right? 2-story, 3-story, because single-story doesn't make sense.
Well, that's my point. If we want to keep that historic look, which is what was shown in that survey that TJ just took at the market, we need to have a block that's supposed to stay historic, like around the post office or around Clinton Street. I mean, we need to figure that out, but we also need some density. So we can't put the 2 side by side. So maybe some other blocks in historic business that allow for apartments or allow for higher density residential could be have an overlay district for that 1 block or 2 blocks or 1.5 blocks.
I don't need to get in the weeds, but I don't see how 1 story is historic.
I think you're right, John. I was thinking about the post office and the
It's a tree.
Marvin, just the Clinton Street look. I mean, the Charbonneau's 1 story.
I always go back to, the men's home, that Clinton Street originally was like wall to wall, big building. Eventual Hotel was amazing. Love to see something like that again. And, you know, we had high hopes for Space to Create, being able to be more interesting looking, and then it got to a certain level of increase in building costs and all that, so it couldn't be as interesting as it might have been. But no, I can't imagine. I mean, I just, the idea of a place where you can only build single story was a red flag to me. I can't imagine doing that anywhere. But it's all part of the discussion we're gonna have.
The Sherman block is all one story. So we wanted to keep that historic. We could have that one story. So I'm not in
Yeah, but
favor of
say
one story. I'm
that-
just bringing it up.
If you say that, then that corner lot that's for sale with the trailer on it would only be able to be one story.
Well, and visually, they're not one story. Visually, they're two story. They're tall buildings.
False
They just
front, yeah.
have high ceilings, and so I mean, we can get into the nitty gritty on this later, but yeah,
Yeah.
and I agree with Michelle. The last thing we want to do is restrict that undeveloped quarter block across the alley to the west to only a single story. In my view,
I don't think it makes sense. I mean, you're paying too much for the footprint. Nobody's gonna wanna go. Well, I don't know. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense.
It's a good guess.
Good conversation. Jack, is your hand raised again, or is that
No, I'll put
lingering?
it down.
Okay, sorry, I looked away and forgot. I'm afraid to ask the question, but I'll go ahead and I'll ask it in a way to ponder. Because it's not lost on me that it's there for a reason and there is a purpose for it. But the DS zone district, I guess I'm just saying, maybe through this exercise, can we find a way? Is there a way to find kind of consolidating that into one of the other zone districts and doing something with an overlay?
That would be a good place for.
well, it's funny you say that because when you mentioned that we only had one overlay, the UROD, my first thought was, isn't the DS an overlay? And I think it might have been an overlay originally, and it became its own zone when we get the most recent rezoning, but I don't know for sure. But I agree, I think it would make more sense as an overlay. I mean, historically, I can maybe shed some light. For years and years and years, we've had people come to us who either own lots along the highway or want to own lots along the highway, and they wanted us to make it full-on commercial. They wanted to be able to do strip development all the way up to the Midway Street. And fortunately, the powers that be along the way were all like, no, we don't want that. The DS zone was a compromise to say, yeah, I think the traffic noise is bad enough that probably not a lot of people want to build a single family or even a duplex right on the highway there. So let's allow for these low impact dentist office, lawyer's office kind of uses.
I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think, CDOT was really, pleased that there were going to be fewer, entry
Curb cuts.
curb cuts.
They wouldn't have allowed curb cuts where it would have been full commercial or not, and you still would have had to come off the side streets. They were like, you can do whatever you want, but you just can't do curb cuts on Highway 62.
Yeah, which is,
And CDOT's come a long way since then anyway, but yeah, I think that's the history to help you know where the DS came from. And I don't know if things have changed, if the environment's changed since then, but I can't imagine having it become more of a roadway that maybe making for some more flexibility.
You could give us a list of the districts you think could go away and we could go from there. Cause I think you kind of already have an idea. And I also.
You know me too
wanted
well,
to
Michelle. I have
learn-
opinions.
But I think it's good that we
But
don't know, right, on all the stuff that we're kind of wishy-washy, we're like, well, we want this, but we don't want that, we're
Yeah.
not really sure, and I think that's actually good in this situation. I don't wanna go into this being like, oh, I think I know.
Right.
Absolutely, we're not, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
We're not professionals, we're residents, we're citizens, and we're taking the advice of the professionals and trying to apply that to what we think the community wants and needs.
Nobody
Right,
else
and-
is-
Oh, related to DS in particular, I think you're asking the right questions of, is the appetite changing? Is it the same? And I think that's what we want to do through this process, right? If it's changing, what's it changing to? Where I kind of go, and again, these are just preliminary thoughts. One, what we're seeing, Angie, more so in the day to day is people who are buying and coming in with those properties are I'm getting the sense that they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what to do because they're buying property on adjacent to a state highway and they can't do what they would typically be able to do on a state highway, right? So it kind of throws property owners for a loop, just the way that it's set up. The other thing that and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Throw more hurdles where they need to go, but they should be purposeful. And then the other way to kind of think about moving forward, if you will, is there a way that, let's just say, a corridor overlay that is any blocks adjacent to 62, is there a synergy between all of those properties from maybe it's a form-based side that says you could do whatever you want in here, provided it looks like this. And I don't know, I'm just throwing these out there as we start getting the juices flowing. I didn't want to get too far into my analysis and thoughts before we had some of these conversations, because I do know that it was done very purposefully in the past. But I also want to delicately make sure that we're asking those questions and saying, hey, does this make the most sense for where Ridgway is going? On that west side of 62. There are a lot of ways to address it. And if, as we're going through this, as you are thinking through zone districts and uses, design, is there something that makes all of that compatible, or is it different? If it's different, there's no problem having 9. Just from a higher level, you have 9 zone districts right now. My gut says that's too many for a community of your size. 6 is usually where like a sweet spot kind of a thing. But that doesn't mean it's wrong, right? You do have certain local context with the highways, with the river, that affect the downtown that affect some of those too. But one of my things is to say, hey, can we consolidate? Is there a way to do this in a little bit simpler way? And maybe not. Maybe now is the simplest way. But I just want to, again, get those juices going. The other one, which probably is not as controversial, is the FD zone district. Those were set up originally, and I don't mean to offend anybody by saying this, but essentially it was set up as speculation, saying, hey, I just want to annex my property and not do anything with it yet. Now we've gotten to, in the development world of, you know what, don't come in with something if you don't have a plan. And that has actually been reiterated a few times in Ridgway with town council. So I think there's some meat behind that statement in town, that it doesn't seem like the FD zone district really does anything for the town anymore. And probably getting rid of that and saying you can develop, but you need to move into an actual zone district with a plan, and some ideas moving forward. That being said, there's lots of ways to handle a zone district. If it goes away, you could do what's called just make it an obsolete zone district, where basically it can stay as is. The zone district stays, it just puts into another section of the code, and nobody can zone to that zone district. But everything that's there right now stays and is completely legal and conforming. So again, those are the 2 big things that pop in the head. And really trying to utilize some of those
It's the third.
location-based. The third?
Yeah, the third one, you said.
That would get us down to 6.
From 9 to 6. I'm on
Oh,
that direct
no,
statement.
Yeah, no. Well, I'll be honest, there might be if well, I don't know. I keep going back and forth. I'm struggling with the historic business and historic residential. Um if there's some way there, but I think that they're different enough. Um
What
but
about the 2 industrial ones? Do
Can
we
we-
know what the difference is?
Yes.
Yes.
It'd be pretty, yeah.
Work outside and work inside. That's kind of what I said.
Well,
Um,
one's more higher impact than the other, one's more industrial.
so here's the other thing. You could take historic residential and call it mixed residential. That I just thought of, by the way.
Well,
Just-
I'd like to step back for a second and
Yeah.
say a couple things. What you're saying about the Highway 62 frontage properties, either side of 62 going west towards the top of town, that really scares me. I think there's too much potential for us ending up with strip development, even though it might not quite look like strip development. That needs to be any commercial type uses that are gonna happen on those lots need to stay in the intent of the original DS, which is really dentist offices, lawyer's offices, that kind of really was
I agree with that. Yeah.
thing. What you described just kind of almost sent shivers up my spine, because I was like, that sounds like if, you know, the idea we make a overlay form-based zone that allows them to do whatever they want as long as it looks like residential. That's in practice, that's not gonna work. Because we're gonna have,
Yeah, but how many dentist office, lawyer offices do you think are going to?
it's residential, let's keep it residential in character. And if there's no need for doctor's offices, I actually think there's potential for a lot of that. I mean, engineering offices and, contractors' offices and all the kinds of uses where they need an office, but their actual business is somewhere else. Where the work they do is on the road and on site. I think there's plenty of rationale for that. And whatever doesn't get developed as DS type uses stays residential, and people deal with the traffic. I don't know. I just, that worries me. And then I just, again, kind of some historical perspective on FD. As far as I can think about it in my head, with my history, that all the FD properties are essentially outlots of existing developments. They're not standalone FD lots where somebody annexed and just said, I want to sit them. They annexed a bigger chunk, did a first phase, and the rest of it is in FD just because there wasn't enough need for the whole thing to be developed. Now, maybe we shouldn't have annexed the whole thing. That's a whole other discussion. But I still see, well, I don't know. You could talk me into getting rid of FD and creating a different thing, but it functionally would stay the same. It would be property that hasn't been developed yet. That is within the town boundary, and
It's a placeholder, right?
Yeah.
Right?
yeah. I mean, some of it could be zoned GC tomorrow, some of it could be zoned R tomorrow. I can
Or
see,
mixed use, yeah.
Jeff's got his hand up again, maybe.
go ahead, Jack.
I just want to say I'm 100% behind John's thought about the downtown service district west of downtown. I agree 100% with his concerns about developing that as a commercial look. So just wanted to throw that in the hopper there. And I think a good positive way to get rid of FD zoning is let's zone it how we want it to be used.
Which is what I was just saying, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Working with the developer, or whoever owns it, some of those property will probably turn over to me. Good discussion, though.
Yeah.
One thing I'll mention is that it's not at all the intent in this process to rezone property. So we don't intend to at all. So even if something is existing, as let's say we get rid of a FD district, we won't just, it won't just go away. It'll stay there some way,
We're
right?
just
So,
not gonna use it anymore.
It would be
correct.
obsolete.
Yep.
Nobody could zone to it.
Like,
But I'm just using that again as an example. As we go through this, who knows what will come out the other end. Um, when we beat this bush enough. Jack.
I say we should rezone them and just not leave them out there unzoned. Is exactly what I was saying. We should not leave them unzoned. We should change future development into a zone property and zone it the way we think it should be.
if someone owns it,
Yeah,
We have to get their permission.
it can be controversial, but you could do it.
Yeah, there's a thing. I mean, again, I say I don't want to go down that path, but you do have the ability. The town does have the ability to do a legislative zoning act, which basically could change all the FD zones to different zone districts, if you will, through this process. It's
I think
legislative.
it's-
It's not ex parte, so you don't need to have the individual applications. So there are multiple ways to do that if we wanted to go down various paths. But I think just to clarify too, Jack, it has a zone district. The zone district is FD. The question is that a purposeful zone district in town with what we're talking about?
And I think, sorry for the, I think a really good property to point out that the potential unintended consequences of this discussion is the big part of Vista Terrace up here that's zoned.
Yeah,
We do not want to rezone that to R or anything like that right now.
Yeah.
And it's a big can of worms.
Yeah.
I mean, that property turned over probably in ownership several times because people come in and tried to develop it, the town said no. But you all remember whatever the name of the the Four Winds thing, and that was only a small part of that big FT. So that's the kind of red flag we need to think about before we go.
yes.
Mhm.
we should be done. Would we allow anything?
That's a good.
Maybe it
Well-
should be in future development if we're not gonna allow development there.
Well,
Yeah.
when we look at it, before, the biggest concern with development is the fact that there are no ways and. So, I mean, I think if somebody was willing to address that. Then we could go ahead and develop it, but it wasn't in the cards with the Four Winds development.
Right. And in the meantime, it allows for one house per 35 acres, so somebody could buy that and build it.
It's a very nice house.
Okay, well, and how many acres is that? So you get one house, two?
He probably just born, that looks to me like it's.
Not even 35.
40 acres, roughly, it's big part of it.
Jack's got his hand up again, maybe.
Yes, I do. I was responding to John's discussion about Vista Terrace. I mean, we could zone that low density residential. I mean, Montrose has 3 different residential zones. So we could do some type of low density residential that we create that makes everybody happy. We just don't have that zone.
But the
So-
1 per 35 seemed reasonable, the county.
That's what future developments allowance is. Yeah.
It's already
What
zoned
is what
out.
it's currently zoned. Mm.
Is what. In train. Density.
Development right.
Which is kind of what they had proposed there. They were showing us how, there was all this property they weren't gonna use because it was too steep. And so they were basically trying to trade density.
On a totally different note, what would it mean to change HR to MR? What would that change? Or, yeah.
So,
Oh,
well,
go
I was just
ahead.
gonna say, you'd want to look at the use table and see what's
Yeah.
allowed in MR. compare it with HR, but I don't have it in front of me right now.
MR allows 18 units per acre.
MR, well, Jack, hold on, because that's you're kind of getting into the master plan density definitions there, because we don't have units per acre in our land use code. That's simply in the master plan. So I don't want to get that confused, but it does allow for quite a bit of density. So does historic residential, but it allows for other uses that are compatible with
Sure.
serving the people that live in the neighborhoods. So maybe like coffee shops and gyms and maybe a little bit of light retail. I can't remember what all is in there, but I think
I
retail's
have it pulled up
allowed.
right here. Yeah. It's these two columns.
Childcare.
Oh, not these. So,
Yeah, it
but
doesn't highlight.
yeah, my thought in doing in just saying that kind of off the cuff is that there are two zone districts that allow small lot development, a mix of housing types. I think the biggest difference is going to be looking at the non-residential, so like microbreweries, distilleries, bars, restaurants, and seeing what those differences are and see if they're palatable. I don't know.
Mhm.
But where I'm kind of coming from at that is you look at the mixed use residential, this is used to do exactly that, create a mix of uses in town. When this was created, no properties were zoned that. We only have one parcel in town that's zoned MR. And so if we're really looking at trying to, have higher density, a mix of uses, compact development, those are very similar in values, right? That we're talking about in the historic
MR.
neighborhood as well, right? So I'm just throwing that out there, and our next steps as we do this will be a deeper dive into those the different uses that are allowed in zone districts and say, what, there's only 6 differences. Do we care? Right? That's part of the maybe I shouldn't say do we care, because we do care, right? That's the whole point of this. But there are only 6 differences between these. Should we combine these and remove an entire layer, or are they different enough in the context of Ridgway to keep them separate? So it's not a saying we need to do this. It's having that informed conversation. Did that make sense, Therese?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on the zone districts? And I know we're
Anything else on zone district discussion?
No.
Okay, we can move on, TJ. Thank you.
excellent. Well, that was a good discussion, and I think will give us some good guidance. So this one, I'll say that I hope it's quick. I don't know if it's going to be or not. But lodging types. So one of the big components is that there's a lot of, I'll call it overlap, potentially duplication in the types of lodging that are allowed in the town. And again, you have all of this in your packets, so I won't really go through it in depth. But first, I wanted to put it into the context of these use categories. We have use categories, as we mentioned, are broader interpretation of land uses that then can be more refined into land uses. And so the 4 categories that, as we go into this conversation, I want you all to think about are group living, healthcare facilities, household living, and lodging facilities. Now, I put a lot more of that in the attachment in the memo, not in the body of the memo, but I think most of that you have at your fingertips through there. Because these all kind of, again, overlap a little bit, but there's some differences. And so I want to talk about the uses here. And I tried to, as I told Angie, this was the most challenging part of this presentation, this PowerPoint, to come up with of how to classify or identify some of these different things. But I'll just go through them. So travel, home park. This is a residential development. It's for long-term dwelling units. There's single-family homes. It does have an extra layer of site plan requirements or design standards for the development side. So it's a little bit different, but it really is not so much a lodging as it is a residential, but it's a little bit more impactful because it's denser and a larger scale development.
So it's AKA a mobile home park.
Yep, exactly.
So Kuno was wrong.
Good point.
I don't know why people think that we have them outlawed. We have a mobile home overlay on our zoning map. Anyway, we don't.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And next is the short-term rentals. So to, again, put this kind of into context, it's a residential use. Short-term rentals is a single family, is a residential dwelling unit that's used for short-term rental. It's transactional and it's accessory. So the principal use of the property is residential, and then they have this opportunity there. So it's in its own kind of category, but still a part of the lodging spectrum in town. Campgrounds are very similar to, well, from a design standpoint, much like a travel trailer park or travel home park. But this is more maybe tourism based. I know you don't have any in town right now, but we want to make sure we're thinking about it. It's for short-term transactional use, mid-level impact, depending on the size, the density, the location. This is also something that has on-site amenities, so people coming and going might be a little bit different than in like a hotel, where there aren't quite those amenities. People might stay at a campground longer than they stay at a short-term rental or a hotel, right? And then a lodging tax. I don't really know if it does or not, but that's another factor in this conversation. What gets lodging tax? What pays lodging tax? I believe that if you had a campground, they'd probably pay lodging tax.
Great.
On the bed and breakfast.
Well, obsolete. I mean, I
Oh.
don't imagine someone's gonna develop a campground within Ridgway. I think that property is too expensive.
You just never know what people.
To take a closer look at the FD.
Maybe it's a
Close one,
perfect for that property up at Vista Terrace.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, again, I mean it's in there, and do we want to not allow it? That's very viable as well, right? Is it meeting a need that the town sees that is missing in that spectrum? That's why we're bringing it up, right? And what's the difference between these things? A bed and breakfast, I actually kind of put it in the same category as a short-term rental because it's a residential building that's actually a commercial use, right? So before, the short-term rental is a residential building and a residential use. This is kind of the same. It does have a limit on the number of units or number of rentals that you can rent out. It also requires the on-site management. It's a low to mid impact, depending on the number, the size, and the location. And then it would also pay lodging tax, right? So it is a lodging type. It's a commercial activity. Boarding and rooming houses. I'll actually say this for both of these items, the boarding and rooming house and the dormitory. These are, for lack of a better term, they're sort of obsolete uses anymore. They usually fit into other things, and we'll talk a little about those. Doesn't mean that they can't fit somehow, but I was racking my brain trying to figure out where a boarding or rooming house would fit in the town, separate from other uses that the town has. But a boarding and rooming house, it's where somebody could stay for compensation. Compensation can be either work or bartering or money of that case. I don't know if they were trying to get to like a guest rent, like the heck is it? Like a oh my goodness, a bunkhouse or something like that on a ranch. Is this where that was trying to go? Um, and then it it also mentions like single unit or single person units. So it's for a person but not their family to stay there. So it's a little bit of a complex definition. I suspect again that lodging tax would apply here. Um, uh, but going to cutting right to the chase of Michelle's question of what's my opinion, this is one that I think can be covered elsewhere if I'm not missing something. Dormitory, this one too, it says right in the definition that it's accessory to something else, like a religious institution, a school, something along those natures that people, students reside there for multiple months or whatever, right? Like a college where they're going there. So I put there that it's residential adjacent. It's not a residential use. It's associated with a principal use, which is one of those other elements. And tied to those, it has shared facilities within the structure, so it doesn't have every unit doesn't have all the living facilities that would be necessary for a dwelling unit, right? So it's this kind of hybrid design. It's like a mid-term type of a facility where you stay there for either a long time, you stay there for the duration of whatever the work is or the activity is that you're there for. It's not forever, if you will. Varying impacts based on the use and the location, and then no lodging tax here because it's not a lodging type facility, but it is relatively, it's not long-term residential use either. Nursing home, this is a licensed facility. The definition has it 5 or more. The next one's really what we're getting at is that this is a, you're not going there general public doesn't really go there. They're going there for a certain reason to get medical treatment for something or for a need because of health reasons. It's not intended for permanent lodging in the sense of residential home, but the length of stay could very much vary. Cutting to the chase here, typically what we see on these types of uses, they'll move to the healthcare facilities, and it's more of a commercial or non-residential type use than it is a lodging or residential use from a site use and design standards side. And then lastly, the hotel and motel side. Those are pretty simple and straightforward, I think, but it's definitely transactional. Someone pays to stay in a room for 1 or more nights. It is less than 30 days. At 30 days, you become a resident. It also doesn't have the facilities that a dwelling unit has. These facilities also have added services such as the restaurant and other components that play into that. It is definitely commercial in nature, and then and more transient, and then it also pays lodging tax. So again, that's kind of the spectrum. Hopefully that kind of helped identify some of the key elements tied to those uses to see some overlaps. And this is a summary of them that we can come back to here in a second if we needed. But this is I didn't mean to do it, but apparently I got 3 considerations for everything that I brought up. So just the questions, the considerations as we start looking at the lodging types. What are the types of lodging that should be allowable in Ridgway? And do you have the right definitions, terms, and standards to regulate those? And then that last one of are they allowed in the right zone districts? So as we start looking at all of this stuff together, not only do we want to make sure that we have the clarity in the zone districts of what the intent of those are and whatnot, but we're allowing the right uses in the right zone districts to implement and realize that intent. So this, I think, is a part of that conversation. So any questions, comments, thoughts?
It seems like this could be cleaned up.
Few things eliminated,
It seems antiquated.
a few of them did. Yeah.
I'll riff on that and just say that if that's the sentiment, next step, and this is kind of goes for all of this, is you'll start seeing red lines coming through. So nothing will just be removed and you'll never see it again. The next iteration of this would be you all seeing a red line version to see what would be coming out and being added in different places. So that's what we're trying to get the guidance on in these conversations, to say, should we just go and redline it and see what those impacts are, or are there things that we should consider before we do all of that?
The things that jump out for me are the boarding / rooming houses. Rooming houses and dormitories. Those categories seem. I just wonder if we need those anymore. And if we want them.
Right.
And do we need manufactured home, small and large, to be separate categories? And I question campground, because I think there's a whole lot more property in the county and the state park where camping would be. I don't really see someone creating a campground in the town limits of Ridgway. I think land is too valuable.
Well, I think the business community would argue that we shouldn't not allow it.
We should not allow.
We should allow campgrounds. I mean, what comes to mind is we've discovered a campground in the middle of Sedona, Arizona, that's right in town, that is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's not a question of whether it makes economic sense. That's not a choice. That's not a person. It's whether or not it contributes to Ridgway's well-being, and having a campground in town. I don't see anything wrong. So, I mean, I get your point. I just don't think that's how we make decisions of whether or not we think it's economically viable. Because that's not our.
The other thing I would maybe say on that in particular is that what we're seeing a lot of, and this is all over the state, moving campground to RV parks and campgrounds. And there's a lot of state guidance on some of that stuff too. But really, when you start getting into the RV parks, which I apologize, I probably should have clarified. I kind of think of campground as part of that too. Everything from, bringing in that $500,000, RV, the bus, all the way to very primitive campgrounds. And we can, in that spectrum, limit what is and is not allowed in town. And I think potentially, and I'll throw this out there to see if you all potentially agree that, you're not going to have a primitive campground. Anything in town would have to be connected to water and sewer. But maybe that high end, if you will, RV park is a viable business option in town. And, in that spectrum.
I was picturing.
Yeah. And so I think if you guys are okay with that, we've done this for at least 3 communities now, specifically on the campground RV parks, and they're getting, honestly, I think pretty good at them, coming up with what those standards are. And those could go in the use standard section. And we change campground to RV parks and campgrounds. And we start moving it towards that less primitive and more, what basically the county and the federal lands don't provide. Those with full services, full
With the
hookups.
train property.
Full hookups, yeah. Full hookup.
Maybe some of this could just be condensed and simplified.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tend to agree with that, but I'll just fair warn that sometimes simplifying does not mean condense. in order to say yes or no to something, you need to have some standards to evaluate it against. So sometimes it adds another, 2 pages, but it will allow you all to make more informed decisions. So if I'm getting the gist correctly, I don't know if I'm reading the room right, but that sounded like a pretty decent idea. Go ahead and get those RV park standards in here.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, Anything else there?
Nope.
Okay. So last, we kind of mentioned this already of timeline and stuff, but here's the timeline. Here's where we are right now, August 19th. Where the heck did this year go? Our next discussion will be on the subdivision process and public improvements that will, hopefully build right on this conversation that we're having. We talked a lot about the private realm right now, right? Private property. We're going to be talking about the public realm. What happens with rights of way? How do we make sure all these things are connecting in the next meeting, and so on and so forth. So that's where we're at there. One of the things that I wanted to Angie and I were talking about earlier today is that we're getting to the point, and we mentioned it, where we're gonna start rolling out some red lines to you all to see and look at. So we're gonna get to the point where we're gonna want feedback so that we can draft things, and then we'll be getting you drafts for review, and then comments back, and we'll be a little bit more standard with that cadence. But one of the things I was thinking or hoping I wanted to talk about, but I'll throw out as a starting point of based on this conversation related to the zone districts, the lodging types, and I guess that's really, what was the third thing we talked about? Form-based and Euclidean zoning stuff, but you don't really need to talk too much about that. But if you do have any ideas or thoughts on these 3 topics that we talked about today, if you could send them to Angie and myself by next Monday. Is that what I said? Yeah, the 24th. It's not your last chance. These are still, I know you don't have anything really in front of you, anything to really digest, but if anything pops in related to these things, send them our way. We'll try to incorporate those into our edits and send them your way for review. Okay?
Sound good, everyone?
Yep.
Great.
All right. And so with that, that's all.
Thank you, TJ.
Yeah, thanks, TJ.
Thanks, everyone. I will stop sharing and let Angie take it over from here.
All right. Do you want to say the next item? If you're ready to move on?
Yeah.
Work session covering an example project requesting a deviation from RMC 749 residential design standards.
Thank you. I'll move this closer. Okay, so before we get into the actual example, I want to go over the history of residential design standards here in Ridgway, and I'll have to admit that I'm not completely clear on some of these pieces. But the history goes back to 1999 when there was a master plan update or a master plan process of sorts. And it was deemed necessary to adopt some interim single-family home design standards. So those were established in 1999. And a lot of that was related to factory-built housing. Then single-family home design standards might have been modified throughout these years, but it seems like that's kind of what was in place until I found proof of it being in place until 2016. But it could have even been until 2020. I don't know. And then in 2020, there was an ordinance that revised all of this. It was considering housing affordability, and this was following the 2019 master plan process. Some of you may recall. But basically, it was determined that we shouldn't call it single family home design standards because they wanted to encourage a mix of housing types. And I don't know exactly what changed in the design guidelines or regulations, but that was what was in place until 2023. Nothing really changed from that 2020 iteration except some landscaping regulations came out. There might have been some other very small tweaks, but that was moved from a building regulation section into our land use regulations. So moved from chapter 6 to chapter 7 in 2023. And that also included placing industrial and commercial design guidelines into the land use regulations. So now it's industrial design standards, commercial design standards, residential design standards. So the difference between guidelines and standards, I'm not going to get into, but guidelines are generally not like shall, and they're not necessarily codified, but they're guidance for folks that are developing. So I have in here notes on recent changes that may impact residential design in Ridgway. And I just want to touch on this briefly. We can talk about it. Michelle brought it up before the meeting started. But adoption of the 2024 I codes and the 2025 Colorado Wildfire Resiliency Code could have some impact on materials that people find feasible for their developments. And adoption of the community housing regulations and guidelines and more affordability considerations are also coming into play pretty often. So I wanted to go over the code language for for residential design standards, but flag here that what we're talking about in this example is going through a deviation process per the code, and there are certain approval criteria that are established in the code for a deviation to be granted, and your body is the decision-making body on these deviations. So I really want to kind of get these clear because I think we're going to be seeing more deviations come through. And the reason this example is in your packet at all is because I had a deviation request that I did public noticing for, made the packet for and stuff, but then they ended up changing the design. So it no longer needs a deviation. So that's why we pulled the public hearing notices. This is not a public hearing. But I didn't want to exclude everything because I think it's a good learning opportunity. So these criteria for a deviation, let me move my little guy. The proposed structure will be compatible and harmonious with structures in the immediate vicinity, and either the proposed architecture or construction standards provide compensating features that meet the intent and objectives of these standards, or the proposed structures support the expansion of workforce housing options within the town of Ridgway. And this was just a summary of the code language, but I have the more specific language. So these are all the sections. And I don't need to get into too much of this, but there are some things that we'd want to consider when looking at the residential design standards and have a general understanding of like what an exterior feature on a house is called, just so we're all on the same page. But a lot of these aren't relevant to Ridgway. A lot of them we don't care about in the residential design standards or specify or use these terms in the residential design standards. So I'll get into that a little bit. The other part about residential design is actually the site design. So we're not just talking about the exterior components of the building. We're talking about the layout of the lot, where the driveway is, where's parking, where's the front door, do we want garages facing the street, do we want porches? There's a lot of that to consider. These are just examples from other codes. So a really important part of this code language is this legislative declaration, which points out like, why do we have these design standards and what are we looking for overall? And I just want to make sure that these things are still the goal. So it says Ridgway is defined in part by architecture and neighborhoods that vary in age and character. And I've just highlighted little pieces of this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But they talk about the master plan. The goal is to create a well-integrated community that meets the needs of residents of various income levels, ages, and stages of family life cycles, to encourage a mix of housing types and densities. And it says here the visual appearance of property affects more than just the property involved, and that structures impact surrounding neighborhood, both in character and property value. So the legislative declaration's kind of setting the stage for this discussion. But some things that I wanted to point out in the code that are kind of coming up again and again. One of them is materiality. So there's certain restrictions on like what kind of siding can be used. And this has gotten even more strict with the wildfire resiliency code being adopted. And generally speaking, the materials that are supported by the town are materials that have historically been here. Roof structure is a really big component to identifying what a house's architectural style is. There, like you were talking about earlier, we had a lot of this discussion. There's areas in town where you can see a flat roof next to a shed roof, next to a gabled roof, next to a hip roof. I just, in this part of the code, it's asking to provide varied roof forms or roof forms that are compatible with those used on adjacent homes. So just a little bit confusing. For the example that we're going to go over very shortly, the piece in here that was really important and that was kind of the red flag to why this would need a deviation is number 8, additions to existing or new homes. And it's weird because this isn't an addition to a new home. It's actually an accessory structure. But the last line in here says attached or detached garages, carports, patio covers, or walls should be designed in the same architectural style as the main structure and be built of similar or compatible materials. There's a bunch of architectural standards in here that mostly have to do with breaking up like monolithic shapes and kind of boring plain surfaces. So a lot of different options for how to provide variation, how to change your mass and height, and how to add fenestration and things like that to break up surfaces, make things more interesting looking. And we talked about that briefly. And then again, there's a big focus on building materials. And this is where that section about exterior metal siding for more than 50% of the total building facade area is not allowed. There's also language in here about glass not being a certain percentage of the facade area, and garage doors not being.
They need to increase. Landing on that person, actually, those standards.
So there's a lot of different types of metal, a lot of different finishes of metal, a lot of different textures of metal that exist now. Some of the architectural standards would allow someone to maybe propose 2 different types of metal to break up a surface. One's wainscoting, one is siding, or 2 different colors or something like that. So it's something to consider. that part was not a concern with the example project, but I do know of another project that will potentially be coming in for a deviation for that particular. Because of the wildfire resiliency code, like we've just heard it. We've heard it a few times now, I guess. So this is the approval criteria and the process for deviation, which I already went through on the first slide. The approval criteria is repeated twice here, so we'll clean that up. And I just wanted to show our historic platting before I show our current kind of parcel lines. So some things, are not quite sticking with the original historic character, and that's okay. It sounds like everyone agrees that that's okay. But there are some important considerations, especially in a district like historic residential, where it's blocks and alleys. And there are a lot of historic structures that already exist.
It's
So,
cool to see that.
yeah, I like it. So you can see the different directions that the lots were facing too, like along Clinton there, north-south. Anyway, so here the light blue is the historic residential district. And the example that I wanted to discuss tonight was a historic residential district property. And here are the existing conditions at the property. So there is a main home, and then there's an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And you can kind of see on the far right, there was like a wooden structure that does have a shed roof, and it's obviously different, but I don't know how long it's been there, seemingly a long time. That's no longer standing. And the proposal was to replace that area with a garage and office that was in this design. So here and in your packet, there's a lot more information about like why I thought this needed to come for a deviation. It might be very obvious to some of you, it might not be so obvious to others, but fenestration is a big one. That's like the placement of any openings, garage doors, windows on any type of facade. And then the roof form is, in this case, a shed roof and another shed roof, but obviously in a very modern sort of context. So, not really consistent with the original home, which was built in 1930, and the ADU, which is much newer, but still it's still consistent with you can see the ADU is consistent with the original home just by placement of the windows and the doors, the gabled roof, some of the detailing. There's like a belly band across. There's a little bit of a porch overhang. It's kind of trying to keep that character intact on the lot. But of course, we want to promote infill development and quality development in the town. So the point of kind of sharing all of this is we may be seeing more of these. I don't know. I'm also trying to stir some discussion about like what is important. If this was an ADU or something like that, would it be more important to be consistent with the home, or does it need to be consistent with the home even though it's a garage and an office? Those Well, so if we go back here to the residential design standards, this is talking about additions to existing or new homes. And then it adds at the end attached or detached garages, carports, where this would fit in. But if we want to go to applicability, it's talking about construction of any residential building, new residential subdivisions, major additions or renovations to existing residential structures, or structures that only contain residential uses.
So what about the certain examples of what you're trying to build? The new building?
There's an array of architectural styles in the neighborhood as a whole. The language in this code section talks about the primary structure on the property, and it needs to be compatible with that. So I would say the proposed structure could be compatible with neighboring structures, but it's not compatible with the primary structure on that lot.
Thinking if it's on the lot or next door, like for the visual look of it.
Yeah, because like we also, you know, it said.
I feel like
it exists first. Neighborhood that two houses next to each other, that's supposed to match or two recently, I forget.
Yeah.
Yeah, substantially similar elevations.
If you don't match. If you build it,
You have to match yourself.
which is a little bit confusing to me. What's the street? View, which direction is?
Whoa.
Oh,
So I wasn't, because this isn't specific to a property, like I'm using this particular house as an example because it was going to require a deviation. They've since changed the plans, and I'm being a little bit more discreet about whose property it was, just by request of the owner. But we can talk about historic residential, which is a giant part of town core in general, and kind of do a little walk around the neighborhoods if you guys want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This
But
just for, no, just to understand, this, which elevation is supposed to be facing the street?
Oh, yeah.
oh, I see what you're saying.
That's.
Let me go back. It's actually it's on the street. It's yeah, let's see. I gotta look at it really quick. Is that the garages? Yes, the garages face the street.
Yeah. Does it need that?
Well, let's see here.
Does it think it's to give a applicant guidance?
Yes. I mean, it's not super specific, which is fun, generally fine. This is not the house, sorry. This is just the district.
Not.
Sure.
I mean, I kind of,
It's my thing.
I kind of question a little bit, you know, if this really deviates that much from the original design because there is a shed room addition under.
Well, and I guess that's the question, like, it's very arbitrary. You and I clearly have a different opinion from each other. So
So you're saying.
That, I think.
see how this is a shed roof here?
No, I'm saying here.
Oh yeah,
It's like
this
the
addition.
game.
Sure.
It's different. And I think that a lot of people see shed roofs as modern, and they're not modern.
But that's clearly sure, but the proposal was clearly like a modern design with a shed roof.
The shed. Often. Even barns, yeah, 12-12 pit. Main gable, and then a 6-12 for the horse stalls. That were often accessed from the outside. Yeah, so I mean. There was a lot of building that went on that was 6-12, or that was 12-12, 6-12.
Sure.
On one side, and sometimes even on both sides. But I actually do kind of have a problem with something that's that out of character with the maintenance.
Well, I think the garage doors alone make it
Yeah.
more modern.
Well, yeah, that's just, I mean, that's another example of fenestration that's not consistent with the original design.
We still, we can be forward these. Twin shed roof. That look like, you know. 3 days. I know it's
Well, it's everywhere. Look around the country, this is the font.
because it's the cheapest way to do it.
That's a
Yeah,
big
it
deal.
is, yeah.
It's a cheaper way to build, you roof.
That
leaks
is
less.
almost.
Valleys,
Yeah.
valleys to build
Right.
up.
It's more efficient code. You know, that's a whole different discussion, but I mean, I think that, you know, we have to look at too, like, you know, the compatibility, if it's a different material, but the colors match, is that compatible? I mean, all.
To some people,
Right.
Yeah.
Again, it's
yeah. So I didn't want to just like dwell on this too much, but essentially,
I think it's important to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, sitting in the audience for like,
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, just, you know, looking at like the original house and then the ADU that was built a few years back. Sure, it has the same roof line, but if they were the same color, to me, they would let in a lot better. But I mean, that's just my opinion. I
It makes
think
sense.
it's a contrast and that looks great too. You know.
to
mhm.
see a photo with the two distinct structures and then the new one superimposed.
Well,
You could probably just whip that out.
can I just go like this?
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Believe.
So this is the one that would then sit basically here.
And they face the street.
The garages would face the street here. The front door would face the street here. And then there's another front door. This is the front door view. So this, sorry, I don't know if you're seeing my cursor, but this is the side that would face the other street. It's a corner lot. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't specify that. See where this gable is here?
Uh-huh.
Kind of helps you with the orientation. Mhm. Yeah, but it's not a dwelling unit. It's just a garage and office. Yeah.
So, I mean, is part of this. Result in this exercise, then you think that we need to do some editing of the design thinking? It's very sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, they're under chapter 7. There's some things that could be cleaned up and make a little more sense and be a little less arbitrary. But I don't want it to get super specific in where it becomes super prescriptive and detailed. There's some really great examples of residential design guidelines that are published out there. They're not codified requirements, but they're guidelines.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I agree, we, for many years. When I was first involved, we had a town attorney who, I loved his advice, it's like, don't make your ordinances really specific. If you make them specific, it's kind of unintuitive, but it becomes easier for people to try and game it and make it more complicated. Keep it really vague, then you can interpret it how you want. And it's tricky, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want the picture, we don't want to be. I mean, there's always references to compatibility when, as we.
Yeah, we don't agree what that means. Yeah.
Ridgway is. That's the group.
When they're not even gonna be lined up in a row, where you're looking at all three of them at once.
Right, so how do you know where the property lines are?
Store were the ones you're gonna see in a row.
And that-
Like, this doesn't.
And that's a good,
First, but then
Yeah, so yeah, I think
And what Teresa's saying about property lines is a very good point because we have allowed subdivisions that vary dramatically from the originally platted town structure. So genuinely, you wouldn't know, is that someone else's property or not? Like this is original. This is how it's sort of been turning out. And those properties, because the language isn't specific where it says that it needs to be the same architectural style, are right next to each other, but not necessarily the same architectural style. And like we talked about earlier, yeah, I mean, when you read the legislative portion of it, and it's talking about a lot of variety and trying to, meet different affordability targets for folks. I don't think that means them getting their whole entire design package together, submitting it to the town and realizing it doesn't meet the residential design standards and then coming to you for a deviation a month later. You know what I mean? That adds a lot of cost. So trying to get a gauge on like what's wasting their time, what do we care about, what's wasting your time. I just was feeling pretty unsure about that aspect and wanted to bring this as an example.
I see so many buildings that have, garage doors proud and that's, I just don't understand. That's one of the guidelines or regulations.
It's a standard in the code, so it's a regulation. It's required.
We fire 12-inch overhangs, but there's a building being built right now that doesn't have a 12-inch overhang.
Yeah, you're talking about Ridge 6. Yeah, approved as part of a PUD. Maybe prior to some residential design standard tweaks, or I don't really know where.
Why do we have these that are constantly deviated?
But I don't know that the rule. Yeah, but I just want to make a point that I don't know what rules were in place at the time of some of those approvals. Yeah. Yep. Exactly. TJ has his hand up.
Sorry, I just
Rescue us.
chime in a little bit on that of like what applies and how. That you mentioned it earlier, Angie, that these used to be guidelines. 2023, we brought them in as standards and didn't really evaluate them a whole lot. That's why they're on that list of things to do next. So they were suggestions before that. And that's when Ridge 6 and a lot of the other stuff, PUDs and everything were in there. So they were not standards, the shalls, they were the guidelines.
That makes sense.
So that's just the timing of it. And then of course the PUD allows them to deviate from them anyway.
Kind of does make sense, but it goes back to, we don't know where the property lines are. So if we see a house in town that's in a PUD, a lot of people wouldn't know that.
Yeah, I guess the point is that the approval preceded the regulation. So even though it's built years later, which is the case.
Yeah, I think I understand that more than a lot of people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that keep saying to me, what about? It's hard to be said grandfathered in, that's, yeah.
And it's the nature of informing people about changes that are coming so that they know that things are constantly changing. And I would appreciate all of your help in kind of passing that message on because it's much easier to explain what's coming and how you can be involved than, oh, you missed this, oh, you missed this, oh, you missed this. So just putting that out there for all the Chapter 7 updates that we are taking on this season. Thank you.
Hence engaged.
I mean, we did attach the residential, the commercial, and the industrial design standards to your packet 2 meetings ago, just as like a, hey, this could maybe stir some discussion. If anybody wants to take a look at them, that'd be cool, but I think I have some direction, some general direction to clarify.
Yeah, you do.
And the legislative statement seems to be like appropriate and how we should be considering the residential design standards. Okay, great. Wow, thanks, Michelle. Okay, that's really all I have on the example. Thank you guys for working through that exercise with me.
Well, hang on at some point, and we're not voting on anything, so I don't think it mattered in this meeting, and I suppose if we were voting, it would be apparent that we lost her, so that would be reported in the minutes, right?
I will ask Lee to still report it in the minutes, and I have a email that's timestamped from Pam.
She told you she was hopping up. Okay.
Item 3.
What's that?
Are we done with this item?
I believe we are unless we. We're reaching the end of the meeting. I'm going to need a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
Second,
It looks like we were all here. So I need a roll call. Ms. Jackson. Okay, sure. Commissioner Liz.
Aye.
Petroselli.
He gave a thumbs up.
Okay. Meyer. Leo. Jefferson. Aye. The motion, the minutes are approved unanimously. And I believe the last item. Oh, no, that is the last item, but then we do, if there's any updates. Sandy, do you have any updates?
I have no updates.
Is there any, I forget where it was. It must have been at work with somebody recently was like, well, if anyone needs this clarified, I can schedule it. And I thought, no, let's be that person. So anyways, with that, adjourned.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, TJ, very much.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.
Thanks,
See you later.
TJ.
Thank you, Jack.